All right, happy Monday. The Secretary General, as you know, was in Antigua and Barbuda and then in Dominica over the weekend following the devastation caused by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. In Barbuda, whose entire population has to be evacuated to the island of Antigua, he said he witnessed a level of devastation that he had never seen before in his life. In Dominica, he noted that the country had been decimated, its whole population impacted, and its forest ravaged by the hurricane. Secretary General reiterated that we now have hurricanes and storms with much higher frequency and a much higher intensity and with direct established links with climate change. The Secretary General called for an enhanced engagement of the international community against climate change and strongly appealed for international solidarity with Caribbean islands through humanitarian aid, but also through new mechanisms following effective reconstruction to build up resilience. Most of the countries impacted are middle-income countries. Because of that, they are deprived of some of the form of assistance or concessional loans that low-income countries can have access to, he said. One of the ideas is that the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean has expressed is the possibility to transform the repayment of debts in investments made by the countries into resilience to storms. The Secretary General stressed that the World Bank will soon be organizing a donors conference. When Caribbean countries are facing external shocks of the magnitude we are witnessing, it is absolutely crucial that they benefit from innovative forms of funding and from assistance, concessional loans, and new bonds, the Secretary General said. Turning to Bangladesh, our humanitarian colleagues on the ground tell us that the number of Rohingya refugees who have fled to Bangladesh from Myanmar since late August has now reached 519,000 people. Aid workers continue to work with government to scale up their operations, and as of October 4th, 515,000 people have been provided with food assistance. The revised humanitarian appeal for $434 million, which seeks to help 1.2 million people, is currently 24% funded. The UN Migration Agency, IOM, says that at least 13 Rohingya refugees, mostly children, drowned when a fishing boat carried them to Bangladesh and capsized in stormy weather. There are approximately 60 refugees aboard the 20-meter wooden fishing vessel when it left Myanmar under cover of darkness, hoping to avoid patrol on both sides of the border, survivors told our colleagues. The World Health Organization and its partners will roll out a vaccination campaign, the second largest of its kind ever, in Cox's Bazar beginning tomorrow. They aim to deliver cholera vaccination to 650,000 people initially, followed by a second round to 250,000 children between the ages of 1 and 5. And our colleagues at the UN mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo report that an attack against its base in Mamundioma in North Kivu this morning. The attack was carried out by suspected allied democratic forces. Initial reports suggest 2 peacekeepers are dead and several more have been wounded. The mission deployed attack helicopters as well as Force Intervention Brigade in support of operations and to reinforce its presence. The UN mission forces are also deployed on the road between Kamango and Mbao to restore order and protect the population of these towns. The injured peacekeepers have been evacuated to Goma for medical assistance, and we hope to update you throughout the day with more information. And the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, announced today that the Central Emergency Response Fund, known as CERF, has now reached its 2017 funding targets of $450 million, following an additional commitment of $6 million from Sweden. Excuse me. He said that given the many challenges we face today with 145 million people in need of humanitarian assistance, achieving the target set for 2017 provides a much-needed boost. But with the increased needs brought on by ongoing conflict and natural disasters this year, the Emergency Relief Coordinator stressed that it's more and more important that donors enable the emergency fund to reach its 2018 target, which is going to be $1 billion. And from Iraq, although the fighting in and around the town of HAWIJA in Iraq's Kirkuk governorate is ending, the UN and its partners are deeply concerned about the safety of civilians in the area. Humanitarian Coordinator for Iraq, Liz Grande, said more than 5.4 million civilians have been displaced in Iraq since 2014. stressing that nothing is more important than protecting civilians who have been impacted by the conflict. He said that protection remains her overriding concern, with aid workers being deeply worried about incidents of collective punishment, restrictions on free movement, evictions, forced returns, sexual exploitation and violence, including in emergency sites and camps. And the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator, Ursula Mueller, will begin a 3-day visit to Ukraine tomorrow. She will meet with senior government officials, members of the humanitarian diplomatic communities, and families displaced by the conflict. She is also expected to visit parts of eastern Ukraine to see firsthand the humanitarian situation of people in areas affected by fighting, now in its 4th year. The World Food Programme has joined forces with Kyrgyzstan to create an online platform that can forecast food security and crises in the country. The new system, developed with funding from Japan, creates many scenarios based on food price spikes caused by natural disasters, conflicts, or socio-economic crises. More information at WFP. And from Mali, our colleagues at UNICEF there warned that today a nutrition crisis exacerbated by continuing violence, instability, and displacement is threatening the lives and futures of thousands of children in the country. More information online. And I also want to flag that the State of Food and Agriculture 2017 report was published today by our colleagues at the FAO. This report argues that millions of young people in developing countries are poised to enter the labor force in the coming decades, need not flee rural areas to escape poverty. On the contrary, rural areas actually have vast potential for economic growth, pegged to food production and related sectors. And with the majority of the world's poor and hungry living in those areas, achieving the 2030 development goals will hinge on unlocking that often neglected potential. And still on the subject of food security, in a video message to the Committee on World Food Security gathered in Rome, the Secretary General stressed that hunger is on the rise, with 815 million chronically undernourished people in the world today. Investing in food security and rural development creates a stronger and more resilient community so that people can prosper and thrive without having to move on. And after we're done here, Brendan will do his briefing on behalf of the President General Assembly. And at 1 p.m., there'll be a press briefing in this room by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, who you know won the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize. And you will see that we issued a statement on that, congratulating them late Friday afternoon. Halas. Edie, letter.
Thank you, Steph. On this attack in Congo, the story out of the region says that 12 people were injured. You only said a number. Is that a figure of about a dozen still accurate?
My sense is, well, I don't want to talk about my sense. We are still in the process of getting hard facts here, confirmable facts. As soon as we have them, we'll share them with you. Yep.
Some other things I want to ask you about Cameroon. Over the weekend, several churches in Boué and in other places in the Anglophone areas were raided by the military, and up to 200 people were arrested, and high bail is being charged to release them. There's also now some footage of the government firing from helicopters on unarmed civilians on the ground. So I'm wondering, does the UN still stand behind this 10 dead figure that was used by Prince Zaid last week? What's the status of Mr. Fall going? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Fall and the government are in discussion about when he could go. There was a team that went last week at the working level from his office, but we're still in discussions with the government. The government have expressed its willingness to welcome him. It's now a matter of finding the dates. As for the number of casualties, I don't have any updated numbers beyond what our colleagues at the Human Rights Office were able to confirm.
And I wanted to ask you, you said last week in after the statement, in back and forth, that of course the internet should be on and social networks. So I wanted to ask you, there's a French firm, Orange, which is, I believe, a government telecom company that has a Cameroonian subsidiary. And they've said publicly that when the government tells them to turn stuff off, they just turn it off. They're a member of the Global Compact. And what I'm wondering is, does the UN believe that private telecom companies that ascribe to these human rights views as put forth in the Global Compact should without notice to people and in a sort of a devious way where they say, sorry for the interruption, we're working to get it back on, obey the government and turn the internet on people?
Look, the Global Compact has processes to which to review whether or not companies should remain members of the Global Compact. That's existing. That's up to them to comment on. Our principled line continues to be that people should have access to the internet, that the internet is a critical tool for which people now in everyday lives to conduct their lives, not only to have access to information. As to the regulatory framework in each country and who's responsible for what, I can't comment on, but on because I don't know about it. But obviously, as a matter of principle, we feel people should have access to the internet. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. I want to ask about Sudan. Recently, the Sudanese government has been cooperating with the UN, and the situation in Darfur somehow is better. Cooperation between Sudan and the international community is getting much better. I mean, the US crossed Sudan from the list of those countries prevented of entering the US, and soon they will announce the lifting of the sanctions. If these steps continue to follow, how would the UN reassess its evaluation, its relations with the Bashir government, especially in light of this resolution of ICC to indict Bashir as a war criminal?
I think you're asking a question best left to analysts. Obviously, the issue of the ICC is not one in which the Secretary General is implicated. That decision was taken by the International Criminal Court. The UN, the Secretariat, has a working relationship with the government of Sudan, both because of the presence of the joint AU-UN mission, and obviously we have a country program and a country team in Khartoum. There are different parts of the UN that have different types of relationships, and it'll be up to everybody to figure out what the best way forward is. Yes, ma'am. Your microphone. Yeah, there we go. You're good. You're good.
A Swiss aid worker was kidnapped on Saturday night. Do you know anything? Do you have
in Sudan?
In Sudan, yeah, in Darfur.
No, I will check.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Lee.
On the ICC, I actually wanted to ask you something on the ICC and what seems to be a connection to the UN Secretariat, or at least its OIOS. You may have seen these leaked documents being analyzed concerning former prosecutor Luis Moreno Ocampo. And the reason I want to ask you is that they touch on Kenya and a decision to try to give Mr. Kenyatta a way out. But Fatou Bensouda has said that it's being investigated by something called the IOM, not the other IOM, but the Internal Oversight Mechanism, which in its bylaws is cooperates in some way with the OIOS. So I wanted to know, is there any, it's all been said from here that there's no connection between the ICC and the UN Secretariat, can you, I'm asking you as a on the UN side, OIOS, do they work with IOM?
You have read those bylaws, I have not. There is no operational link between the UN and the ICC, whether or not it's often the case that various internal oversight bodies of different parts of the system, writ very large, cooperate with each other, but OIOS does not have any jurisdictional oversight over the ICC.
Is it? I mean, I guess I'm just wondering. I don't know if they'll answer if I ask them. So, could you ask them whether OIOS is playing any role in what's described as an investigation of these?
What I'm telling you is that OIOS does not have any jurisdiction over the International Criminal Court.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And can I ask you one? I had asked you in writing, but I want to ask you now. Just try again, one last time. The meeting between the Secretary General and the Philippines Foreign Minister. It was now 10 days ago, but there have been increasing readouts from it, including totally contradictory ones. One side says that he criticized Agnes Calamar in the meeting, and another, Human Rights Watch, claims that Mr. Cayetano offered for some kind of some international oversight on this issue of extrajudicial killings. So why wasn't a readout put out, and could you provide, at least on those two issues, which was it? Was it, or was it both? Why?
I'll see if I can get anything. I don't have anything with me.
Okay.
Thank you. And Brendan will